Happy Sunday. Yeah, I think it's Sunday. Happy Sunday, friends. Hope everyone's doing well. Looking forward to the beginning of a brand new week. So today, for good or for bad, better or worse, I got probably page and a half, 2 pages worth of talking points on 12 Steps and 12 Traditions, the introduction and the foreword. I thought, what better way to kind of kick this thing off if I was going to do it than, number one, I got to jump, right? I got to jump and I got to hit the parachute and pray to goodness gracious that I've done the packing correctly. So there's that. I got to go. Number two, I thought if I'm going to go at the book, I should certainly address kind of the intent of the book, which would be found in the introduction initially, and then the foreword to the 12 Steps and 12 Traditions. That noted, just reading through it and hitting some of the bigger points in these, 3 or 4 pages, there's not a lot to it. What jumped out at me was the importance of the history and how much that impacted me. Certainly being generational in my own scenario here, it's important to me to kind of know where I came from. That said, I think it's also important for us in recovery to kind of know where we came from. There's so much value in this. I mean, when you're sitting down for your meal and you're getting into your meat and potatoes, and to those people who don't eat meat, I have no idea. And I'm not mocking you, I'm simply saying I have no idea what the meat part of your meal would be, so forgive me please. But having said that, when you sit down to a meal and you're ready to punch that sustenance in and fill your belly and feel good, there is so much of that sustenance in this history, in understanding what they were up against, what they were doing, what they had accomplished. And even though the introduction and the foreword to the 12 Steps and 12 Traditions is only about, I think, 4 or 5 pages, something like that, a lot of that initial history is there. And that's what set me off on the passion that got me through Alcoholics Anonymous Comes of Age, A Brief History. If you're coming to me for direction, I'm telling you, the big book Alcoholics Anonymous, for me it's been the 3rd edition. It'll be whatever edition you find yourself in. The 12 Steps and 12 Traditions, absolutely. Alcoholics Anonymous Comes of Age, those are my big 3. Big book, 12 and 12, Alcoholics Anonymous Comes of Age. And without question, get a daily meditation. I firmly believe that these books, along with a couple of notebooks to make notes in, are intrinsic to your recovery. You have to get in the pages and you have to make this stuff alive in the fibers of your being. So that's why, for me, I hope that was cohesive and makes sense. But that's why I feel if I'm going to do this, I have to get into the foreword, the introduction, and discuss a little bit of the history, because it's found right here. Number one, the 12 and 12 was written 18 years after the founding. Bill writes about his meeting with Dr. Bob, and how Dr. Bob being a surgeon, Bill being a New York broker, their initial meeting in 1935 would ultimately lead to the founding of Alcoholics Anonymous. Or 34, 35. So if you can imagine, Alcoholics Anonymous, the big book, was written in 1939 or published in 1939 as their basic text. Those first 4 years were fraught with just growth and explosiveness. And what does he write here? He writes, I wrote it down. I made some talking points, as I said. Come on, cooperate. Explosive experience. What a great set of words, man. Forgive the sidebar, but as somebody who is just in love with the written word, what a great choice of words, man. Explosive experience, man. So again, yeah, I mean, 18 years after the founding of, or the initial meeting of Dr. Bob and Bill W., they write the 12 and 12 in 1953. And in that 18 years, they try to encapsulate that experience in these pages. And he discusses the publication of the Big Book Alcoholics Anonymous 4 years after their meeting in 1939. And they only count at that point in time 100 people as continuing successful sober cases. 4 years, and they've only got about 100 people. It's mind-boggling to think about that. He also goes on to discuss in these pages how at the time of his writing, they were a worldwide organization. 18 years in, a worldwide organization of 100,000. Their society consisted of 100,000 in 1953 by their numbers, and they were counting themselves as a worldwide organization. It's mind-boggling to think of the millions upon millions that have found recovery. I broke this up into a couple of spots here. First, the introduction, then the forward. So in the introduction, I made the point of writing down that the book is written 12 and 12 from 1953, 18 years after founding. At that point, there had already been some discussion about rewriting, maybe editing, maybe correcting some of the verbiage and language to make it more cohesive and current. And the membership then had voted that down, thinking that Bill's writing should absolutely be maintained. That it embodied the collective spiritual experience of the society at that point in time. And they go so far as to make the note that in 2002 at the General Conference, that it was again kind of voted that Bill's initial writing would be maintained. And I think that's important to note, because when we consider the Bible itself, we've got the New International Version, we've got the New Revised Standard Version edition, we've got how many myriad interpretations and translations of these spiritual texts have there been over the years? I mean, the Catholic Church omits this many, and then the Protestant Church brings in that many, and then this one has 64 65 original books, and these sacred texts have been butchered by human beings for countless generations. And here we have this private little society whose only goal is to keep each other sober. That's all we do, is just try and keep each other sober. And this private little society says, you know what? No, man. We're not changing a thing. This is what Bill wrote down. We're sticking with it. And for no other reason but because Bill's words carried weight. We all agree that I didn't know much. That's what got me to the doors of Alcoholics Anonymous. Bill figured something out. Let's keep it the way it was, right? Getting on into the forward, we touch again on the idea that worldwide in 1953 they counted their numbers at about 100,000 people. And what I thought was really interesting is the way they word their success, the way Bill finds that language exactly as we're talking about, and we choose to keep that intact. The way he discusses this is by writing, they've found that practicing these principles will expel the obsession to drink and leave us happy and usefully whole. there's no cure there, right? And I think that's important to discuss. There's so many of these new age recovery centers popping up that claim they have a cure. And those of us at this end of it realize you're one drink away. You put a shot of bourbon, rye and coke, gin and tonic, you name it, right here next to a glass of water. The water's going to go down well. The other ones, they're going to be a problem for me. To that end, there's no cure, right? I know deep within my person that I long ago lost the ability to consume alcohol safely. And we discuss that right here in these pages where Bill writes. We've learned that these principles, and I'm paraphrasing obviously, expel the obsession to drink, leaving us happy and usefully whole. It's a fascinating idea, and I'm so grateful that these words were left intact. They also discuss in the foreword, and I think it's interesting to note, the initial founders here in 1953 were recognizing that people from outside of Alcoholics Anonymous found these ideas so fascinating that there was already discussion of application outside of AA, and Bill discusses that in these pages. So even then he recognized that there would be use for these ideas, for these principles, spiritual in nature, outside of Alcoholics Anonymous. And we have to understand at this point, we have to accept, I think we have to give validity to the reality that certainly that speaks back then to the birth of other recovery facilities, other ideas of recovery, other entities of recovery, learning that a small tweak in language, a small tweak in a word may take these ideas and apply them to other people, right? Narcotics Anonymous, I have a very dear friend who I hope to collaborate with very soon, who himself has enjoyed the exact same rebirth in life that I've enjoyed. And for him, he found his recovery in the doors of Narcotics Anonymous. And I had been to a number of NA meetings myself early on. I just could not find the success in those doors that I found with members of Alcoholics Anonymous. My own father found the same success that I did, obviously. There's also discussion about, Bill and Bob and when they were first introduced to each other. And Bill makes note that the initial principles that they founded the group, the Alcoholics Anonymous, the initial principles that they founded themselves upon were certainly borrowed from both religion and medicine. Excuse me while I flip some pages and make a lot of noise here. But he does make note that although those initial principles were certainly borrowed from religion and medicine, they made note that the behavior and needs of the fellowship itself lended itself to the language of the 12 steps and 12 traditions. Obviously, again, I'm paraphrasing here, right? But we're discussing the 12 steps and 12 traditions, and it's worth noting that he writes that these initial principles, being borrowed from religion and medicine, needed a little tweak, and that tweak came directly from the behavior and the needs of the fellowship in those earliest days. They make note of the first big book publication in 1939, only 4 years after they met. Could you imagine? 4 years. I mean, that's how long, well, I mean, less than, but I mean, from the time I met Sarah to the time I finally got sober was right around three years. I damn near lost my entire wife, children, family, and everything in that amount of time. And here they are turning this brand new thing into something that was going to benefit others and something that they could set free and let go of. I always go back to that idea of the anonymity that existed at that point in time. And I don't know this to be true, but I mean, the story that I heard was that Bill W.'s grave is just a small little stone with his name, Bill W. That's it. There's no monument to him. There's nothing. All we have is this oral tradition. The actual stone is just a small little Bill W. And that's, for me, the power of just spirituality in anonymity. The power of that. The idea that one man with another man, two drunks together, can accomplish so much, and there's no monument to that. There's just this oral tradition. It's fascinating to me. Sorry if I digress here. Only 100 recoveries at the time of publication of the first big book, 1939. 4 years in, they only had 100. And that's also the moment where the 12 steps became official. Success and free publicity had made the 12 traditions kind of a definite idea going forward, and he writes about that as well. While the book hits publication and just explodes on the scene at that point in history, the free publicity that they had or that they enjoyed came from, clergymen, priests, doctors, psychiatrists, what have you. I mean, people were seeing that this small little society had recognized so much success in a field that at that point in history had, every reason to just be written off. Like, it was seemingly impossible to get people sober and keep them sober long term, to get people off of their addictive behaviors and turn them into, functioning members of society again. It just seemed like all hope had been lost at that point in history. And here's this small little society, a stockbroker and a surgeon who themselves had found sobriety and then found out that developing these ideas, these principles, these spiritual foundations, and freely giving them away to others was the key to the whole problem. And with that, and publishing a book to that end, the publicity just fell out of the sky for them. Free publicity. How many people wish for that? That created a whole other monster. And he writes about this, while tens of thousands started to flock to the doors of Alcoholics Anonymous, it created a whole other idea. Earlier on, he writes about within those initial years, they were only able to secure 3 groups. I believe there was one in Akron, one in New York, and one in Cleveland. Correct me if I'm wrong, please, but I believe those were the initial 3 groups, and they accounted among their numbers 100 long-term sober cases, as he writes here. With the publication of the book, the explosion began, and it made the 12 traditions kind of a foregone conclusion. And this becomes another fascinating idea that he discusses in the book. People recognizing that this small society needed no central government, needed no one person with power over another, just one drunk to another drunk, keeping each other sober a day at a time, was really all we needed to function. Some basic ideas on building groups and how money should be handled, and once the basket gets passed, what happens to that, etc., etc., etc. Those basic ideas to keep groups honest and keep them functioning were really all that was required. But beyond that, one drunk to another drunk, one addict to another addict, sitting across the table from each other, and all we want to do is keep each other sober and clean and healthy and happy, and that keeps us going. Just concern for our fellow drunk. Fascinating idea. So those are kind of the talking points that I made. Just that. I hope it's cohesive. At least I'll watch it back and make sure. But getting into the 12 steps and 12 traditions, I thought it important to kind of, at the very least, do something where I spoke openly about the book, the points that I felt were worth discussing, the points that I felt needed to be made. One here right at the very bottom of the page, and I thought this was really interesting, man. It just speaks to how massive this idea was, and the potential for success that I'm sure Bill and Bob and their little group, they had no idea. They obviously had no idea. I'm sure that they probably considered it on some level, but they had no concept of how massive this idea eventually was or would become, because he writes, at the time of publication in 1953, they counted themselves, a worldwide organization with 100,000. And he writes, at the time of the writing anyways, 40 foreign lands. We currently find ourselves in 40 foreign lands. At the time of the printing for this edition, there's 180 countries. And we know today, millions upon millions upon millions have benefited from this idea. And certainly they knew then that these ideas, spiritual in nature, would be borrowed, and they would apply to so many other concepts of recovery, and they have been. I mean, we know that today. And I'm just so relentlessly grateful for their gift so freely given. So I hope I'm doing it some justice here. I pray that I can benefit anybody with my little effort to bring this to you guys out there in the ether, and I want to do it right. So like, comment, share, hit me up with some comments, drop some comments there. Let me know what I'm doing right, let me know what I'm doing wrong, man. Again, I want to make sure that this is done correctly. I'm like 22 minutes in. Jeepers, this has got to be the longest one yet. So thank you so much, guys. It works if we work it one day at a time, and I'm hoping this was not a bad one. That's for sure, man. Step one coming. Take care. Bye.